The first time Sophia Miller saw the vast Montana territory spread out before her was the day she lost everything. The dusty trail ahead shimmered in the July heat of 1875, and the stagecoach that had just deposited her and her meager belongings at the weathered way station seemed eager to continue its journey without her. Sophia watched it disappear into the distance, taking with it her last connection to civilization and the life she once knew. "Miss, you planning on standing there till sundown?" The gruff voice of the station manager pulled her from her thoughts. "Last room's yours, up those stairs. Dinner's at 6 sharp if you want it." Sophia nodded, gathering her carpet bag and the small trunk containing all that remained of her former life in Boston. At 22, she had never imagined she would find herself alone in such a desolate place, but circumstances had forced her hand. Her father's debts, his subsequent suicide, and the scandal that followed had made it impossible to remain in polite society. The teaching position at the newly established school in Silver Creek was her salvation, her only option. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single window that overlooked the endless prairie. Sophia sank onto the bed, removing her bonnet and allowing her chestnut hair to fall loose around her shoulders. Tomorrow, someone from Silver Creek would arrive to escort her the final 15 miles to her new home. For now, all she could do was wait and wonder what fate had in store for her. When morning came, Sophia dressed carefully in her best traveling outfit, a navy blue skirt and jacket over a crisp white shirtwaist. She had just finished pinning her hair into a simple chignon when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching the station. Peering out her window, she saw a lone rider dismounting from a magnificent chestnut stallion. He moved with the easy grace of a man accustomed to life in the saddle. Tall and broad-shouldered, his face shadowed by a well-worn Stetson, he exuded the quiet confidence of someone who knew his place in the world. This, she assumed, must be her escort to Silver Creek. Gathering her belongings, Sophia descended the stairs and stepped outside into the bright morning sunshine. The man turned at the sound of her footsteps, and she found herself looking into the most startlingly blue eyes she had ever seen. "Miss Miller?" His voice was deep, with a slight drawl that marked him as a man of the West. "Yes, I'm Sophia Miller," she replied, extending her gloved hand. He removed his hat, revealing thick, sun-bleached brown hair, and took her hand briefly. "Jackson Hayes, madam. Most folks call me Jake. I'm here to take you to Silver Creek." Sophia studied him for a moment. His face was tanned and weathered, with lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though he wasn't smiling now. He appeared to be in his early 30s, and everything about him, from his worn leather chaps to the revolver holstered at his hip, spoke of a life vastly different from any she had known. "I appreciate you coming for me, Mr. Hayes," she said, quickly averting her gaze when she realized she had been staring. "Jake," he corrected. "We don't stand much on formality out here." He gestured to a wagon hitched to 2 sturdy-looking mules that she hadn't noticed before. "Your trunk can go in the back. It's not the most comfortable ride, but it'll get us there before nightfall." Sophia nodded, watching as he effortlessly lifted her trunk into the wagon. The station manager emerged with a package wrapped in brown paper. "Provisions for the road," he explained, handing them to Jake. "Miss Miller settled her bill this morning." Jake nodded his thanks and turned to Sophia. "Ready when you are, Miss Miller." She took one last look at the way station, then allowed Jake to help her up onto the wagon seat. The leather was warm beneath her, and she adjusted her skirts carefully, conscious of the man climbing up beside her. The distance between them on the seat was minimal, and she could detect the scent of leather, horses, and something uniquely masculine. Jake clicked his tongue, and the mules began to move forward. He had tied his stallion to the back of the wagon, and the horse followed docilely. "That's a beautiful horse," Sophia commented, desperate to break the uncomfortable silence that had fallen between them. "Maverick?" "Yeah, he's a good one. Had him since he was a colt." Jake glanced over at her. "You know much about horses, Miss Miller?" "I'm afraid not. In Boston, I rarely had occasion to ride." "Boston." Jake raised an eyebrow. "That's a mighty long way from Montana Territory." Sophia looked away, focusing on the distant mountains. "Yes, it is." Jake seemed to sense her reluctance to discuss her past and fell silent, his attention returning to the trail ahead. For several miles, they traveled without speaking, the only sounds the creak of the wagon wheels and the steady plodding of the mule's hooves. The landscape was unlike anything Sophia had ever seen, vast, open plains stretching to distant mountains, the occasional stand of cottonwoods marking the presence of water. It was beautiful in its stark simplicity, yet also terrifying in its emptiness. "May I ask what brings a Boston lady all the way out to Silver Creek?" Jake finally asked, breaking the silence. "Not many Easterners choose to settle in these parts, especially women on their own." Sophia considered how much to reveal. "I'm to be the new schoolteacher. The town council wrote that they've just built a schoolhouse and are eager to provide education for the children in the area." Jake nodded. "They've been talking about that schoolhouse for 2 years now. Finally finished it this spring. Folks are real proud of it." He gave her a sidelong glance. "You got experience teaching?" "I was a governess for a family in Boston," she replied, the half-truth coming easily to her lips. She had indeed been a governess for all of 3 months before her father's disgrace had cost her the position. Jake seemed to accept this. "Well, the kids in Silver Creek are a little rough around the edges, but they're good kids. Most of them, anyway." There was a hint of amusement in his voice. "Are you from Silver Creek, Mr. Hayes?" Sophia asked, curious about this man who seemed so at ease in this wild country. "Jake," he reminded her. "And no, not originally. Came out west after the war. Worked cattle drives for a while, then bought my ranch about 5 years back. It's a small spread, but it's mine." There was unmistakable pride in his voice. "You fought in the war?" Sophia asked softly. Jake's expression hardened slightly. "Confederate cavalry. Not something folks around here ask about much." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry," Sophia said quickly. Jake shrugged. "It was a long time ago." They fell silent again, and Sophia turned her attention to the scenery. After a while, Jake pointed out landmarks: a butte with an unusual formation, a creek that ran year-round, a distant stand of pines that marked the beginning of higher elevation. As the sun climbed higher, the heat became more intense. Sophia could feel perspiration beginning to dampen her clothing beneath her jacket, but she resisted the urge to remove it. Such an action would be highly improper in the presence of a man she had just met. Jake seemed to notice her discomfort. "There's a shady spot up ahead by a creek. We can stop there for a bit, let the mules drink." Sophia nodded gratefully. When they reached the creek, Jake helped her down from the wagon, his strong hands encircling her waist momentarily. The brief contact sent an unexpected flutter through her stomach, and she quickly stepped away, smoothing her skirts. The creek was small but clear, running over smooth stones. A cluster of cottonwoods provided welcome shade, and Sophia sank gratefully onto a fallen log while Jake tended to the animals. "Here," he said, returning to offer her a canteen. "The water's good." She accepted it with murmured thanks, taking a careful sip. The water was cool and refreshing, and she found herself drinking more deeply than was strictly ladylike. Jake busied himself with the provisions the station manager had provided, laying out bread, cheese, and dried beef on a clean bandana. "It's not fancy, but it'll keep us going." Sophia joined him, suddenly aware of how hungry she was. They ate in companionable silence, and Sophia found herself studying him when she thought he wasn't looking. There was something compelling about Jake Hayes, a quiet strength that seemed to emanate from him. "You keep looking away every time I catch your eye, Miss Miller," Jake said suddenly, his voice holding a note of amusement. Sophia felt heat rise to her cheeks. I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was staring. A slow smile spread across Jake's face, transforming his features and causing those lines at the corners of his eyes to deepen. I didn't say I minded. He leaned back slightly, regarding her with those startling blue eyes. Truth is, I could watch you all day. The bluntness of his statement left Sophia momentarily speechless. In Boston, men of her acquaintance had never been so direct. They couched their admiration in flowery compliments and proper social niceties. This man's honesty was as disarming as it was refreshing. "Mr. Hayes," she began. "Jake," he corrected once more, his smile unwavering. "Jake," she conceded. "Don't worry, Miss Miller," he interrupted gently. "I'm not in the habit of making unwelcome advances. Just stating a fact. You're a mighty pretty woman, and after riding alone for days on end, I appreciate the company." Sophia didn't know how to respond to such directness. She busied herself with refolding her napkin, very aware of his gaze still upon her. "We should probably continue our journey," she finally said. "I wouldn't want to impose on your time any more than necessary." Jake nodded, standing and offering his hand to help her up. "No imposition." Getting to know the new schoolteacher is important business. The rest of the afternoon passed more comfortably than Sophia would have expected. Jake pointed out wildlife antelope in the distance, a red-tailed hawk circling overhead, and told her stories about the area. He had a way of speaking that was straightforward yet engaging, and Sophia found herself laughing at his dry observations about frontier life. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, the landscape began to change. The flat prairie gave way to more rolling terrain, with stands of pine and aspen dotting the hillsides. In the distance, Sophia could make out what appeared to be buildings. "Is that Silver Creek?" she asked, leaning forward slightly. Jake nodded. "Home sweet home. Not much to look at, but it's growing. When I first came through, it was just a trading post and a saloon. Now we've got a proper main street, general store, even a church." As they drew closer, Sophia could see that Silver Creek was indeed a small but established town. A wide dirt street formed the main thoroughfare, lined with wooden buildings. People moved about their business, men in work clothes, women in calico dresses, children running and playing. It was a far cry from the elegant streets of Boston, but there was something appealing about its unpretentious vitality. Jake guided the wagon down the main street, nodding to people who called out greetings. Sophia was acutely aware of the curious glances directed her way. News of the new schoolteacher's arrival had clearly preceded her. "The schoolhouse is at the end of town," Jake explained, with a small house attached for the teacher. "The ladies of the town have been getting it ready for you." Sure enough, as they approached the end of the street, Sophia could see a modest but newly constructed building with large windows. Beside it stood a small cottage with a porch across the front. Both buildings looked freshly painted, and there were even a few flowering plants in pots on the cottage porch. As Jake pulled the wagon to a stop, a group of women emerged from the cottage. They ranged in age from perhaps 30 to 60, all dressed in simple frontier attire, but with an air of dignified purpose that Sophia recognized immediately as the town's unofficial welcoming committee. "Mrs. Whitaker," Jake called, jumping down from the wagon. "I've delivered your schoolteacher safe and sound." A stout, gray-haired woman stepped forward, her face creased in a welcoming smile. "Miss Miller, we're so pleased you've arrived. I'm Martha Whitaker, head of the school board." Jake helped Sophia down from the wagon, and she found herself surrounded by the women, all introducing themselves at once. There was Mrs. Whitaker, Mrs. Peterson, the minister's wife, Mrs. Collins, who ran the general store with her husband, and several others whose names Sophia struggled to remember. "We've got the house all fixed up for you," Mrs. Whitaker was saying, leading Sophia toward the cottage. "It's small, but it should be comfortable for a single lady." The interior of the cottage was indeed small, just a main room with a cast-iron stove for cooking and heating, a small bedroom, and a lean-to at the back that served as a washroom. but it was clean and neat, with simple curtains at the windows and a colorful quilt on the bed. "It's lovely," Sophia said sincerely. "Thank you all for your kindness." "School starts in 2 weeks," Mrs. Whitaker informed her. "That should give you time to settle in and prepare. We've got about 20 children enrolled, ages 6 to 14. As the women showed Sophia around, explaining the workings of a stove and where to find the well, she was aware of Jake bringing in her trunk and carpet bag. He set them down just inside the door, then stood awkwardly, hat in hand. "Well, Miss Miller, looks like you're in good hands," he said. "If you need anything, my ranch is about 3 miles north of town. Anyone can point you in the right direction." Sophia moved toward him, extending her hand. "Thank you for bringing me safely to Silver Creek, Mr. Jake," she corrected herself with a small smile. He took her hand, and for a moment, their eyes met. Something passed between them, a spark of connection that took Sophia by surprise. "My pleasure, Miss Miller." He released her hand and settled his hat back on his head. "Ladies," he nodded to the other women and stepped outside. Through the window, Sophia watched him untie his stallion from the back of the wagon, swing up into the saddle with effortless grace, and ride away. Only when he disappeared from view did she realize that Mrs. Whitaker was speaking to her. "And Mr. Collins will deliver groceries tomorrow morning. Is there anything specific you need, dear?" Sophia turned back to the women, forcing her thoughts away from Jake Hayes and his disconcertingly direct blue eyes. "That's very kind. Perhaps some tea, if it's available?" The women stayed for another hour, filling Sophia in on the town, the school, and the families whose children she would be teaching. By the time they left, promising to return the next day to show her the schoolhouse properly, the sun had set, and Sophia was exhausted. She lit the lamp Mrs. Whitaker had shown her how to use and began to unpack her meager belongings. As she carefully hung her dresses in the small wardrobe, she found herself thinking about Jake. He was unlike any man she had ever met, straightforward, seemingly unconcerned with social niceties, yet there was a genuine kindness about him that had put her at ease despite his sometimes disconcerting directness. "I could watch you all day," he had said, and the memory of those words brought an unexpected warmth to her cheeks. She shook her head at her own foolishness. Jake Hayes was simply being polite to a newcomer. She had no business reading anything more into his words or actions. Sophia finished unpacking, washed as best she could with the basin of water the ladies had left, and changed into her nightgown. As she climbed into the unfamiliar bed, she realized that for the first time since leaving Boston, she wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring. Silver Creek might be a far cry from the sophisticated world she had known, but perhaps here, where no one knew of her father's disgrace, she could build a new life for herself. With that comforting thought, she blew out the lamp and drifted into sleep, her dreams filled with endless prairie skies and a pair of startlingly blue eyes. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. True to their word, the ladies of Silver Creek helped Sophia settle into her new home and prepare for the start of school. Mrs. Collins delivered groceries as promised, along with a small box of tea that Sophia suspected was a special order. Mrs. Whitaker introduced her to the schoolhouse, showing her the new blackboard and the books that had been ordered from back east. Sophia threw herself into preparing lessons, determined to be the best teacher these children had ever had. It was a welcome distraction from the memories that still haunted her father's pale face as he told her they were ruined, the whispers and averted gazes of former friends, the humiliation of selling her mother's jewelry to pay for her journey west. She saw Jake Hayes only twice during those 2 weeks. Once, he rode past the schoolhouse while she was sweeping the porch, tipping his hat to her with that same slow smile that made her heart beat a little faster. The second time, she encountered him at the general store, where he was purchasing supplies. "Miss Miller," he greeted her, that drawl making her name sound somehow special. "Mr. Hayes," she replied, nodding politely. "School's starting soon?" "Monday next," she confirmed. looking forward to it. There was genuine interest in his eyes. Sophia found herself smiling. Very much, though I admit to some nervousness. You'll do fine, he said with such certainty that she almost believed him. They had exchanged a few more pleasantries before he tipped his hat and left, leading his stallion down the street. Sophia had watched him go, wondering why this man, of all the people she had met in Silver Creek, made her feel so unsettled. The first day of school arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures. Sophia had risen before dawn, dressed in her most professional-looking attire, a high-necked gray dress with white collar and cuffs, and arranged her hair in a severe bun at the nape of her neck. She wanted to present an image of competence and authority from the start. As the children began to arrive, accompanied by parents or older siblings, Sophia stood at the schoolhouse door, greeting each one with a smile and a firm handshake. There was Tommy Collins, the storekeeper's son, a freckle-faced boy of about 10, the Peterson twins, Sarah and Samuel, who looked to be around 8, little Mary Johnson, barely 6 and clinging to her mother's skirts, and a dozen others, all eyeing her with varying degrees of curiosity and wariness. The last to arrive was a girl of about 14, tall for her age with sun-bleached blonde hair pulled back in a simple braid. She rode up on a pinto pony, dismounting with the easy grace of someone who had been riding since before she could walk. "You must be Miss Miller," the girl said, approaching with confidence. "I'm Hessie Hayes." Sophia blinked in surprise. "Hayes? Are you related to Jake Hayes?" The girl nodded. "He's my uncle. My pa was his older brother. Pa and Ma died of fever 2 winters back, so I live with Uncle Jake now." "I see," Sophia said, recovering her composure. "Well, I'm very pleased to meet you, Jessie. Welcome to school." Jessie grinned, revealing a missing tooth on the left side. "Uncle Jake says learning's important, even for girls. Says I need to know more than just horses and cattle if I'm going to make something of myself." Sophia found herself warming to this forthright girl. "Your uncle sounds like a wise man." "He has his moments," Jessie replied with a cheeky grin that suggested a close relationship with her guardian. As the school day progressed, Sophia found herself repeatedly impressed by Jessie Hayes. The girl was quick-witted and eager to learn, though her education had clearly been spotty at best. She could read fairly well, but struggled with arithmetic. Her knowledge of history was limited to stories she had heard, and her handwriting was atrocious. But her questions were thoughtful, and she helped the younger children without being asked. When school dismissed for the day, Jessie lingered behind as the other children rushed out to play before heading home. "Miss Miller? Uncle Jake asked if you'd like to come to dinner at our place this Saturday. He says it's to welcome you proper to Silver Creek, since he didn't get a chance before with all the ladies fussing over you." Sophia was taken aback by the invitation. "That's very kind of him, but I wouldn't want to impose." Jessie waved a hand dismissively. "It's no imposition. Uncle Jake's a good cook, and we don't get much company out at the ranch. He said to tell you he'd come fetch you himself if you're agreeable." Sophia hesitated. Propriety dictated that an unmarried woman should not dine alone with a bachelor, but this wasn't Boston, and Jake's niece would be present. Besides, she was curious to see more of the countryside and to learn more about the Hayes Ranch. "Please tell your uncle I would be delighted to accept his invitation," she finally said. Jessie's face lit up. "Great. I'll tell him. He'll be pleased as punch." She hesitated, then added, "He talks about you, you know. Says you're not like other women he's met." Before Sophia could respond to this startling revelation, Jessie was gone, running out to where her pony waited patiently. Sophia watched as the girl mounted with easy grace and rode off, wondering what exactly Jake Hayes had been saying about her, and why the thought made her pulse quicken. Saturday arrived clear and bright, a perfect early autumn day. Sophia spent the morning cleaning her small cottage, and the afternoon fretting over what to wear. She finally settled on a dress of deep green that she had only worn once before leaving Boston. It was perhaps a bit formal for a ranch dinner, but it was one of the few nice things she had kept, and she found herself wanting to look her best. At precisely 4 o'clock, there was a knock at her door. Sophia took a deep breath, smoothed her skirts, and opened it to find Jake Hayes standing on her porch. He had clearly made an effort with his appearance. His clothes were clean, his hair neatly combed, and he had shaved recently. The sight of him caused that now familiar flutter in her stomach. "Miss Miller," he greeted her, removing his hat. "You look lovely." "Thank you, Mr. Hayes," she replied, pleased by the frank admiration in his eyes. "And thank you for the invitation." "Jake," he reminded her with a smile. "And it's my pleasure. Jesse's been talking about nothing else all week." He helped her up into the wagon, not the one they had traveled in before, but a smaller, cleaner one with a proper seat, and they set off through town. Several people called out greetings as they passed, and Sophia was acutely aware of the curious glances. News of her dinner invitation had clearly spread. Once they left the town behind, Jake relaxed visibly, and the conversation flowed more easily. He asked about her first week of teaching, listened attentively to her assessment of the various students, and chuckled at her description of Tommy Collins' attempt to place a frog on her desk. "That boy's father was just the same," he commented. "Some things don't change." As they traveled, the landscape opened up, revealing rolling hills covered in grass that was beginning to turn golden with the approach of autumn. Here and there, stands of cottonwoods or aspens added splashes of green and yellow. In the distance, mountains rose blue against the sky. "It's beautiful," Sophia said softly, taking in the vista. Jake glanced at her, something warm in his eyes. "It grows on you. When I first came west, I couldn't imagine staying. Now, I can't imagine being anywhere else." The Hayes Ranch came into view as they crested a small rise, a modest but well-maintained house with a wide porch, several outbuildings, a corral with horses, and beyond, a meadow where cattle grazed. It wasn't large by Western standards, Jake had explained earlier, but it was enough for him to make a decent living. Jessie came running out to meet them as they pulled up to the house, her face alight with excitement. "Miss Miller, you came." "Of course I came," Sophia replied, smiling at the girl's enthusiasm. "I said I would, didn't I?" Jake helped her down from the wagon, his hands strong and sure at her waist. "Jessie, why don't you show Miss Miller around while I see to the horses?" Jessie was only too happy to comply, leading Sophia on a tour of the ranch with obvious pride. The house was simple but comfortable, with solid, well-crafted furniture and touches that spoke of a woman's influence: curtains at the windows, a colorful quilt on the settle, wildflowers in a jar on the table. "My mom made those curtains," Jessie explained, following Sophia's gaze. "And the quilt. Uncle Jake kept everything just like it was when she and Pa were alive." Outside, Jessie showed off the vegetable garden she tended, the chicken coop, and her favorite mare in the corral. By the time Jake joined them, Sophia had a clear picture of life on the Hayes Ranch: hard work, certainly, but also a place of beauty and peace. Dinner was a simple but delicious affair: roast beef, potatoes, carrots from the garden, and fresh bread that Jake admitted he had traded for in town. Jessie chattered throughout the meal, telling stories about school and asking Sophia questions about Boston and her journey west. Sophia found herself relaxing, enjoying the easy companionship of the Hayes family. Jake was different here, in his own home, more open, laughing often at Jessie's stories, his eyes crinkling at the corners in a way that Sophia found increasingly appealing. After dinner, as dusk began to fall, Jake suggested they sit on the porch. The evening was mild, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of sage and pine. Jessie, claiming homework to do, disappeared inside after extracting a promise from Sophia to visit again soon. Left alone with Jake, Sophia felt a moment of awkwardness, but he put her at ease with his straightforward manner. "You're good with Jessie," he commented, leaning back in his chair. She thinks the world of you already. She's a wonderful girl, Sophia replied sincerely. You've done a fine job raising her. Jake's expression softened. I'm doing my best. It wasn't in my plans to become a father at my age, but when my brother and his wife died. He shrugged. Jessie had nowhere else to go, and she's family. It was very honorable of you to take her in, Sophia said softly. Jake looked uncomfortable with the praise. Nothing honorable about it. Just doing what needed doing. He paused, then asked, What about your family, Miss Miller? You don't speak of them. Sophia tensed, looking out across the darkening landscape. I have none left. My mother died when I was 16 and my father. She swallowed hard. My father passed last year. Jake seemed to sense there was more to the story, but didn't press. I'm sorry for your loss. They sat in silence for a moment, watching as the first stars appeared in the deepening blue of the sky. Sophia was acutely aware of Jake beside her, his presence both comforting and unsettling. Why did you invite me here, Mr. Hayes? She asked suddenly, surprising herself with her directness. Jake turned to look at her, his expression serious in the gathering darkness. Jake, he corrected automatically. And I invited you because I wanted to see you again. Because you intrigue me, Miss Miller. You're not like any woman I've ever met. His honesty took her breath away. In Boston, men couched their intentions in flowery language and social niceties. Jake Hayes simply spoke his mind. I don't know how to respond to that, she admitted. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. You don't have to respond. Just know that I enjoy your company, and I hope you enjoy mine. Before Sophia could reply, the door opened, and Jessie emerged, yawning dramatically. Uncle Jake, it's getting late. Shouldn't you be taking Miss Miller back to town? Jake chuckled, rising from his chair. Subtle as always, Jessie. He turned to Sophia. She's right, though. I should get you back before the good ladies of Silver Creek start organizing a search party. The ride back to town was quieter than the journey out, but it was a comfortable silence. The night was clear, with a 3/4 moon illuminating the trail. Sophia found herself reluctant for the evening to end. As they approached her cottage, Jake slowed the wagon. Would you consider coming out to the ranch again? Perhaps next Saturday? Jessie would love it, and so would I. Sophia knew she should refuse. Already, the women of Silver Creek would be gossiping about her dinner at the Hayes Ranch. To accept a second invitation so soon would fuel speculation about her relationship with Jake. But looking at him in the moonlight, his eyes earnest and hopeful, she couldn't bring herself to say no. I would like that very much, she replied softly. The smile that spread across his face was worth any amount of gossip. He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of her cottage and jumped down to help her alight. As his hands encircled her waist, Sophia felt that now familiar flutter in her stomach, stronger than before. Thank you for a lovely evening, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake didn't immediately release her, his hands lingering at her waist. The pleasure was all mine, Miss Miller. For a breathless moment, Sophia thought he might kiss her. Instead, he stepped back, tipping his hat with a smile. Good night, Miss Miller. Sweet dreams. Good night. Jake, she replied, his name feeling both foreign and right on her lips. She watched as he climbed back into the wagon and drove away, her heart beating a rapid tattoo against her ribs. Only when the sound of the wagon had faded did she turn and enter her cottage, her mind whirling with emotions she wasn't sure she was ready to examine too closely. The following weeks fell into a pattern. Sophia taught during the week, growing more confident in her role as the children responded to her firm but kind approach. Jessie Hayes proved to be her brightest student, devouring books and asking questions that challenged Sophia to expand her own knowledge. Every Saturday, Jake would arrive at her cottage, and they would spend the day at the ranch. Sometimes they went riding, Jake patiently teaching Sophia the basics of horsemanship on a gentle mare. Other times, they simply sat on the porch, talking for hours while Jessie worked in the garden or tended to her beloved horses. Sophia learned that Jake had grown up in Virginia, the second son of a modestly successful farmer. He had joined the Confederate Army at 18, fighting until the surrender at Appomattox. With nothing left for him in the war-ravaged South, he had headed west, working as a cowhand before saving enough to buy his small ranch. In turn, she told him about her childhood in Boston, her education at a ladies' seminary, and her brief career as a governess. She carefully avoided mentioning her father's financial ruin or the scandal that had followed his suicide, but Jake seemed to sense there were parts of her story she was holding back. "Someday," he said during one of their conversations, "I hope you'll trust me enough to tell me the whole truth, Sophia." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the intimacy of it sent a shiver through her. "Someday," she promised, surprised to find she meant it. As autumn deepened, bringing cooler days and frost-tinged nights, Sophia became aware of the changing nature of her feelings for Jake. What had begun as simple appreciation for his kindness had evolved into something deeper, more complex. She found herself watching for him in town, her heart quickening at the sight of him. She treasured their conversations, his insights, his quiet strength. And she wasn't the only one who had noticed. The ladies of Silver Creek, led by Mrs. Whitaker, had begun to drop hints about Jake's bachelor status and what a fine catch he would be for the right woman. Mrs. Collins went so far as to directly ask if there was an understanding between them. "Mr. Hayes and I are friends," Sophia had replied firmly. "Nothing more." But even as she said the words, she knew they weren't entirely true. There was something growing between them, unspoken but undeniable. It was late October when everything changed. Sophia had been in Silver Creek for nearly 3 months, and the town was preparing for a harvest festival. The schoolhouse would be decorated, there would be food and music, and everyone from miles around would attend. "You'll come with us, won't you?" Jake asked the Saturday before the festival. They were sitting on his porch, watching as Jessie practiced roping a wooden calf in the yard. "With you and Jessie, you mean?" Sophia clarified. Jake hesitated, then seemed to make up his mind about something. "No, Sophia. With me. As my guest. My companion." The implication was clear. He was asking to escort her publicly, a declaration of interest that would be recognized by everyone in Silver Creek. Sophia's heart raced. "Jake, if it's too soon, I understand," he said quickly. "I know there are things you haven't told me, reasons why you might be hesitant. But I want you to know how I feel. These past months, getting to know you, spending time with you. It's been the best time of my life since before the war." Sophia looked into those earnest blue eyes and knew she couldn't refuse him. Despite her better judgment, despite the secrets she still kept, she had fallen in love with Jake Hayes. "I would be honored to attend the festival with you," she said softly. The smile that lit his face was like the sun breaking through clouds. Without warning, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a brief, gentle kiss. It was over almost before it began, but it left Sophia breathless, her lips tingling, her heart pounding. "I've been wanting to do that for weeks," Jake admitted, his voice husky. Before Sophia could respond, Jessie let out a whoop from the yard. "Finally. I was beginning to think you two would never stop making eyes at each other and do something about it." Jake laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Nothing gets past that girl." Sophia couldn't help but laugh too, even as her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "She's very perceptive." The day of the harvest festival dawned clear and crisp, with just enough of a nip in the air to remind everyone that winter was approaching. Sophia dressed with extra care, choosing a dress of deep burgundy that she had altered from one of her Boston gowns to better suit frontier life. She left her hair looser than usual, with just the sides pinned up and the rest falling in waves down her back. Jake arrived precisely at noon, looking more handsome than ever in a clean white shirt, dark vest, and his best trousers. He stared at her for a long moment before finding his voice. "You look beautiful, Sophia." "Thank you," she replied, pleased by his obvious admiration. "You look quite handsome yourself." Jessie, dressed in her Sunday best with her blonde hair neatly braided, rolled her eyes at their exchange. "You both look fine. Can we go now? I don't want to miss anything." The festival was already in full swing when they arrived at the schoolhouse. Tables laden with food lined one wall, musicians were tuning up in a corner, and the room was decorated with autumn leaves, dried corn stalks, and pumpkins contributed by local farmers. Sophia was immediately surrounded by her students, all eager to show her the decorations they had made. Jake stood back, watching with a smile as she exclaimed over paper chains and painted leaves. When she finally extracted herself and returned to his side, he offered his arm with a gallant gesture that made her laugh. "Miss Miller." "Mr. Hayes." Mrs. Whitaker bustled over, her face alight with curiosity. "How lovely to see you both." "Together," she added meaningfully. "Mrs. Whitaker." Jake nodded politely. "The festival looks wonderful. The ladies have outdone themselves." "Yes, well, it's important to maintain civilized traditions, even out here in the wilderness," Mrs. Whitaker replied. Her eyes darted between them, clearly bursting with questions she was too polite to ask directly. Jake saved them from further interrogation by suggesting they sample the food. As they filled their plates and found seats at one of the long tables, Sophia was acutely aware of the glances and whispers. By attending the festival with Jake, she had confirmed what many had already suspected, that there was something between them beyond mere friendship. After eating, when the musicians began to play, Jake held out his hand. "May I have this dance, Miss Miller?" Sophia hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. "You may, Mr. Hayes." The dance was a simple waltz, one of the few formal dances that seemed to have made its way west. Jake was surprisingly graceful for a man who spent most of his time on horseback, leading her confidently around the floor. "Where did you learn to waltz?" she asked, surprised. A shadow crossed his face briefly. "Before the war, at parties back in Virginia. Seems like another lifetime now." Sophia squeezed his hand gently. "I'm glad you remembered." As the afternoon turned to evening, the festival continued. There were games for the children, more dancing, and as darkness fell, lanterns were lit, casting a warm glow over the proceedings. Throughout it all, Jake remained at Sophia's side, attentive but not possessive, his hand occasionally brushing hers in a gesture that sent shivers up her arm. It was late when Jake finally suggested they leave. Jessie had already fallen asleep on a bench, exhausted from dancing and playing. Jake lifted her easily into his arms, and they made their way out to the wagon. "She had a wonderful time," Sophia commented as Jake settled his niece in the back of the wagon, covering her with a blanket. "We all did," Jake replied, turning to face her. In the moonlight, his features were softened, his eyes dark and intent. "Sophia, I need to tell you something." Her heart skipped a beat at his serious tone. "Yes." He took her hands in his touch warm against the cool night air. "I'm falling in love with you. I think I started falling the moment I saw you standing at that way station, looking so out of place and so determined all at once." Sophia's breath caught in her throat. She had known, of course, that his feelings were deepening, just as hers were. But to hear him say it out loud. "Jake, you don't have to say anything," he interrupted gently. "I know there are things in your past that trouble you, things you're not ready to share. I respect that. I just wanted you to know how I feel." Sophia looked up at him, this man who had come to mean so much to her in such a short time. He deserved the truth. "My father killed himself," she said abruptly, "after losing everything in bad investments. There was a scandal. He had used money that wasn't his, money entrusted to him by others. When it was discovered, he couldn't face the shame. He left me nothing but debts and a ruined name." She waited for the shock, the withdrawal that had come from others when they learned of her disgrace. Instead, Jake's grip on her hands tightened. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," he said simply. "It must have been terrible for you." Sophia stared at him in disbelief. "Didn't you hear what I said? My father was a thief, a coward who took his own life rather than face the consequences of his actions. In Boston, no one would receive me after the scandal broke. The family I worked for as a governess dismissed me. My own relatives turned their backs on me." Jake's expression remained steady, his eyes never leaving hers. "I heard you, and I'm still standing here, still holding your hands, still telling you I'm falling in love with you." Tears filled Sophia's eyes. "How can you? You don't know I know you," Jake interrupted firmly. "I know you're kind and patient with the children, even when they test your limits. I know you're brave, coming all this way alone to start a new life. I know you're intelligent and funny and stronger than you give yourself credit for. And I know that none of what your father did changes how I feel about you." A tear slipped down Sophia's cheek. Jake released one of her hands to gently wipe it away. "Out here, people don't care much about who your daddy was or what he did," he said softly. "They care about who you are, what you do. And Sophia Miller, you are an extraordinary woman." Unable to speak past the lump in her throat, Sophia did the only thing she could think of. She stepped forward and pressed her lips to his in a kiss that conveyed everything she couldn't say. Jake's arms went around her, pulling her close as he returned the kiss with a tenderness that made her heart ache. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I take it you feel the same way?" he murmured, a smile in his voice. Sophia laughed softly. "Yes, Jake Hayes. I'm falling in love with you too." From the back of the wagon came a sleepy voice. "Does this mean Miss Miller's going to be my aunt now?" Jake groaned, closing his eyes briefly. "That girl has the worst timing." Sophia couldn't help but laugh. "We should get her home." The ride back to Sophia's cottage was filled with a comfortable silence, broken only by Jessie's soft snores from the back of the wagon. Sophia leaned against Jake's shoulder, content in a way she hadn't been in years. When they reached her door, Jake helped her down, his hands lingering at her waist. "I'll see you tomorrow? For Sunday dinner at the ranch." Sophia nodded. "I'd like that." He kissed her once more, gently, before climbing back into the wagon. "Sweet dreams, Sophia." "Sweet dreams, Jake," she replied, watching as he drove away, Jessie still sleeping peacefully in the back. As she prepared for bed that night, Sophia reflected on how much her life had changed in just 3 months. She had come to Silver Creek broken and afraid, carrying the weight of her father's disgrace. Now, she had found not only purpose in her teaching but also a chance at happiness with a man who saw her for who she truly was. For the first time in a very long time, Sophia Miller fell asleep with a smile on her face and hope in her heart. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Sophia's life. She continued teaching, delighting in her students' progress, while her relationship with Jake deepened. They spent every Saturday and Sunday together, sometimes at the ranch, sometimes exploring the countryside on horseback, sometimes simply walking along the creek that gave the town its name. Jake was teaching her to ride properly, and Sophia found she enjoyed the freedom of galloping across the open plains, the wind in her hair, Jake at her side. Jessie, delighted by her uncle's happiness, appointed herself Sophia's guide to ranch life, teaching her about horses, cattle, and the rhythm of the seasons. As November arrived, bringing the first snow flurries, Jake began to speak of the future. He talked of expanding the ranch, of building a larger house, of the life they might have together. He never pushed for a formal commitment, respecting Sophia's need to move at her own pace, but his intentions were clear. It was on a particularly cold Saturday in late November that Jake surprised her with a gift, a beautiful woolen shawl in shades of green and blue. "To keep you warm," he explained as she ran her fingers over the soft fabric. "The winters here can be harsh." "It's beautiful," Sophia said, wrapping it around her shoulders. Thank you. They were sitting before the fire in Jake's house, Jessie having gone to bed early, with a slight cold. The flames cast a warm glow over the room, creating a sense of intimacy that made Sophia's heart beat faster. Jake took her hand, his expression serious. Sophia, there's something I want to ask you. She knew in that moment what was coming. A part of her had been expecting it, hoping for it, even as another part trembled with uncertainty. I love you, Jake said simply. These past months with you have been the happiest of my life. I want to spend the rest of my days with you, waking up to your smile, building a life together. He took a deep breath. Sophia Miller, will you marry me? Sophia looked into those blue eyes that had captivated her from the first, and knew there was only one answer she could give. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Jake Hayes, I will marry you. The joy that spread across his face was like the sun breaking through clouds. He pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left her breathless. When they finally broke apart, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. It was my mother's, he explained, opening it to reveal a simple gold band with a small sapphire. My father gave it to me before I left Virginia, said I should give it to the woman I chose to spend my life with. Sophia's eyes filled with tears as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. It's beautiful, she said softly. I'll treasure it always. They were married on Christmas Day, 1875, in the small church in Silver Creek. The entire town turned out for the ceremony, the women having decorated the church with evergreen boughs and red ribbons. Sophia wore a dress of deep blue silk, a gift from the ladies of the town, who had pooled their resources to order the fabric from back east and then helped her sew it. Jessie stood beside her as bridesmaid, beaming with pride and excitement. And when Reverend Peterson pronounced them man and wife, and Jake lifted Sophia's veil to kiss her, the cheers that erupted from the congregation could have been heard all the way to the mountains. The celebration that followed at the town hall was a joyous affair, with food and music and dancing that lasted well into the night. As Jake whirled her around the floor in the first dance, Sophia felt a happiness she had never thought possible. Mrs. Hayes, he murmured, drawing her close. I like the sound of that. So do I, she replied, her heart so full it might burst. Later, as they drove through the moonlit night to the ranch, their home, now Sophia nestled against Jake's side, his arms strong around her. Happy, Mrs. Hayes? He asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. Happier than I ever dreamed possible, she answered truthfully. That night, as they came together as husband and wife for the first time, Sophia discovered new depths to her feelings for Jake. His touch was gentle yet passionate, his love for her evident in every caress. And afterward, as she lay in his arms, listening to his steady heartbeat, she marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had come west broken and afraid, carrying the weight of her father's disgrace. She had found not only a home and purpose, but a love she had never thought possible. Jake Hayes had seen past her defenses, past the secrets and shame, to the woman beneath. And in loving her, he had helped her learn to love herself again. Spring came early to the Montana Territory in 1876. The snow melted, revealing tender green shoots pushing up through the rich earth. The cattle on the Hayes ranch welcomed new calves, and Maverick, Jake's stallion, sired a promising colt that Jessie immediately claimed as her own. Sophia, to her surprise and delight, discovered she was expecting a child of her own due in late summer, according to Mrs. Whitaker, who had served as midwife to most of the women in Silver Creek. Jake was overjoyed at the news, his face lighting up with a happiness that took years off his appearance. He immediately began making plans for the baby: a proper cradle, a larger bedroom, even talking of sending away for books on childcare. Our child will have everything we can give him, he declared. Or her, he added hastily, seeing Sophia's raised eyebrow. She continued teaching until the end of the school year in May, by which time her condition was becoming obvious. The school board, led by Mrs. Whitaker, had already hired a replacement, a young widow from Helena who would take over in the fall. "You'll be too busy with your baby to worry about other people's children," Mrs. Whitaker declared when Sophia expressed regret at leaving her position. "Besides, everyone knows a woman's place is with her family." Sophia might have argued the point. She had, after all, enjoyed her independence as a teacher, but the truth was, she was looking forward to focusing on her growing family. She had come to love ranch life, finding satisfaction in the rhythm of the days, the connection to the land, and most of all, in building a life with Jake and Jessie. Jessie, for her part, was thrilled at the prospect of a cousin, for she still referred to Sophia as her aunt, despite Sophia's status as her uncle's wife. The girl had blossomed in the months since Sophia had entered their lives, her natural intelligence nurtured by Sophia's teaching, her confidence growing under the combined love and guidance of her uncle and his wife. "I hope it's a girl," Jessie confided one evening as she helped Sophia prepare dinner. "Boys are too noisy." Sophia laughed. "I think babies of both sexes are noisy. But whether it's a boy or a girl, this child will be very lucky to have you as a cousin." Jessie beamed at the praise, her cheeks flushing with pleasure. Life on the ranch settled into a pattern as spring gave way to summer. Jake was busy with the cattle, often leaving before dawn and returning late, tired but satisfied with the day's work. Sophia managed the household, tended the garden with Jessie's help, and prepared for the baby's arrival. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains, talking about their day and their dreams for the future. Sometimes Jake would read aloud from one of the books Sophia had brought from Boston, his deep voice bringing the words to life. Other times, they would simply sit in companionable silence, content in each other's presence. It was on such an evening, as August drew to a close and the first hints of autumn tinged the air, that Sophia felt the first pains. "Jake," she said quietly, placing a hand on her swollen belly. "I think it's time." He was on his feet in an instant, his face a mixture of excitement and fear. "Are you sure? It's not too early?" Sophia shook her head. "Mrs. Whitaker said it could be any day now. And this feels different." Jake was already moving, calling for Jessie, giving instructions for her to ride to town and fetch Mrs. Whitaker. The girl, sensing the urgency, asked no questions, saddling her pony and galloping off into the gathering dusk. The next hours passed in a blur of pain and effort for Sophia. Jake stayed by her side, holding her hand, wiping her brow, his face etched with concern as her labor progressed. Mrs. Whitaker arrived just as things were intensifying, shooing Jake from the bedroom with assurances that all was proceeding normally. "First babies often take their time," she told him firmly. "Go make yourself useful. Boil water, prepare clean linens, and for goodness sake, stop pacing." Dawn was breaking when the first cries of their child filled the small ranch house. Sophia, exhausted but triumphant, held out her arms as Mrs. Whitaker placed the swaddled infant against her chest. "A fine, healthy boy," the older woman announced as Jake burst into the room, his face anxious. Mother and child both doing well. Jake approached the bed almost reverently, his eyes fixed on the tiny face of his son. When Sophia looked up at him, she saw tears tracking silently down his cheeks. "He's perfect," Jake whispered, sinking down beside them. "Sophia, he's absolutely perfect." "Would you like to hold him?" she asked, her heart swelling with love for both her husband and her newborn son. With careful hands, Jake took the baby, cradling him as if he were made of the most delicate crystal. The look of wonder on his face was something Sophia knew she would remember all her days. "What shall we name him?" Jake asked, his voice husky with emotion. Sophia had been thinking about this for months. "I thought perhaps James, after your brother. James Hayes." Jake's eyes, when they met hers, were filled with a love so profound it took her breath away. James it is. James Miller Hayes. Mrs. Whitaker, having discreetly busied herself with cleaning up, now approached the bed. I'll leave you three to get acquainted. Jessie's about to wear a hole in the floor with her pacing. Shall I send her in? At Jake's nod, the door opened, and Jessie peered in hesitantly. Seeing Sophia awake and the baby in Jake's arms, she crept forward, her eyes wide with curiosity. Come meet your cousin, Jessie, Sophia invited. James Miller Hayes. James, Jessie repeated, peering down at the tiny, red face. He's so small. But he'll grow, Jake assured her. And he'll need his big cousin to teach him all sorts of things. Jessie's face lit up at this prospect. I can teach him to ride and rope and read, and let's start with keeping him fed and dry, Sophia suggested with a tired laugh. The rest will come in time. As the sun rose higher, casting golden light through the bedroom window, Sophia looked at the three faces surrounding her. Jake, her husband, his eyes filled with love and pride. Jessie, her niece in all but blood, eager and curious, and little James, her son, new to the world but already so beloved. This was her family. This was her home. And in this moment, with the Montana morning spreading out before them like a promise, Sophia knew that the journey that had begun in pain and fear had led her exactly where she was meant to be. 5 years passed, bringing changes both expected and surprising. The Hayes Ranch prospered, allowing Jake to expand their holdings and build the larger house he had dreamed of. James grew from a tiny, red-faced infant into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's stubborn determination. Jessie, at 19, had blossomed into a beautiful young woman, as comfortable in the saddle as any cowhand, but also possessing a quick mind and gentle heart that made her beloved in Silver Creek. She had recently caught the eye of the new doctor in town, a serious young man from Pennsylvania who looked at her as if she hung the moon. Sophia had returned to teaching, but only part-time, taking on advanced students in the afternoons while a full-time teacher handled the younger children. This arrangement allowed her to balance her love of education with her devotion to her family, which had grown to include a daughter, Elizabeth, born 2 years after James. Silver Creek had grown as well, with new businesses opening along the main street, including a proper hotel and a small bank. The railroad had come within 20 miles, making travel easier and bringing new settlers to the area. Through it all, Jake and Sophia's love had deepened, weathering the challenges of ranch life, parenthood, and the occasional disagreement with a strength that surprised even them. They had found in each other not just passion but partnership, not just love but friendship, building a life together that exceeded all their expectations. It was on the anniversary of their first meeting 7 years to the day since Jake had picked up Sophia at the way station that they found themselves once again sitting on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over the mountains. James and Elizabeth were already asleep, exhausted from a day of play. Jessie was in town, attending a social at the church with her doctor. Jake and Sophia were alone, a rare and precious occurrence. Happy anniversary, Jake said softly, reaching over to take her hand. 7 years since I first saw you, standing there looking so out of place and so determined all at once. Sophia smiled, remembering. I was terrified. Everything I knew, everything familiar, was gone. I had no idea what awaited me here. Regrets? Jake asked, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. She turned to look at him, this man who had become the center of her world. Not one. Every step, every choice led me here, to you, to our children, to this life. How could I regret any of it? Jake's eyes, still as blue and captivating as the day they met, held hers. The first time we sat together, at that creek on the way to Silver Creek, you kept looking away every time I caught your eye. Remember what I said? Sophia's smile deepened. You said you could watch me all day. Still true, Jake murmured, lifting her hand to his lips. 7 years later, and I still find I can't take my eyes off you. Sophia Hayes. Flatterer, she teased, but her heart swelled with the knowledge that his words were sincere. Not flattery if it's true, he countered, pulling her gently from her chair and into his lap. I love you, Sophia. More today than yesterday, less than tomorrow. As his lips found hers in a kiss that still had the power to make her pulse quicken, Sophia reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the broken, fearful young woman who had stepped off that stagecoach to the confident, loved wife and mother she was now, it was a transformation she could never have imagined. The woman had looked away, but the cowboy had said he could watch her all day. And in that simple, honest declaration, he had begun to heal her wounded heart, to show her that her past did not define her future, that love could grow in the most unexpected places. As the last rays of the setting sun gilded the mountains and the first stars appeared in the deepening blue of the sky, Sophia Hayes knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be, in the arms of the man she loved, surrounded by the family they had created, beneath the vast Montana sky that had witnessed their beginning and would watch over their future together. And she knew, with equal certainty, that whatever challenges that future might hold, they would face them as they had faced everything else together, with love and courage and the unshakable bond that had formed between them on a dusty trail in the summer of 1875. The woman had looked away, but the cowboy had said he could watch her all day. And in the end, it was those simple, honest words that had changed everything.